Good morning, everyone. If anyone saw my previous posting, I messed up a little bit. I got the collab time wrong, so since I've already gone live, we're gonna do something anyway. Don't worry, I'm not just gonna start stream and end stream. That's just weird. That feels weird. So we're going to continue reading. Kat just came in. Hi, Kat. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. Great. I'm doing amazing at the whole being aware of time zones and things, clearly. And did I mix a different schedule thing up? Yeah. Hi, Kat. I mixed it up with another collab I usually do in the week. That's what happened. But we can read we can read some more of Salome's Kiss. Until then. Yeah, we can. Because I have another collab that I was doing regularly in the weekend at this time. So, you know, I'm very with it. I'm very pro, very put together. But yeah, I thought we'd continue Salome's Kiss because we need to get some more of that read. We do. So let's open it up. My wonderful lesbians. I'm excited to see how much more chaos we get out of them. love Genevieve's design so much. It's just so beautiful. This piano was a wedding present. Father bought it for Mother after they married. That was what Genevieve told Letitia during one overcast afternoon, a pair of them seated by said piano. Genevieve's expression had been wistful, her head bowed as she let her fingers trail across the piano's ivory keys. She had sounded so unlike herself. Letitia paused their lesson to look at her. How old is this piano? Do you know? Not precisely. Genevieve shook her head. Her hair, which was unpinned as usual, tumbled around her shoulders in waves. I think it was brought here 20 years ago. That was what Mother said, at least. This piano must be older than I am. It used to be in the downstairs drawing room until... Until? God, Letitia, what could have happened? When Mother died, shock and awe. How could we have predicted this was the reason? Father no longer wanted to look at it. He had it hauled all the way up here. I hadn't played it at all this last year, not until you arrived. It seemed such a shame to keep hidden away, though. I'm glad it finally has a purpose. You don't resent me for playing your mother's piano? No, I don't. As if I would resent you for something so silly. Genevieve's eyes had creased in the corners at this inquiry, and she had laughed. If Mother was here, I'm sure she would be pleased too. You play so very nicely, and she always did love music. These words made Letitia flush, and she glanced away shyly, hoping Genevieve did not see it. Clara had complimented her piano playing too. Their bond had only increased during the afternoons they spent working on Clara's scales, side by side, their fingers brushing. Genevieve was much better than Clara had been, though. Somehow that made her praise ring all the more true, which in turn made it all the more embarrassing. Letitia only hoped Genevieve would never see how badly her words had stirred her heart. She did not think she could bear it. Well, Letitia shifted upon the piano stool, her dull dark skirt shifting around her legs. If your mother loved music as much as you say, then we should continue with your lessons. I am sure, with a bit of practice, you will be a credit to her. Do you truly think so? Yes, indeed. You're a fast learner and you have all the basics down already. I think you're quite talented. Oh, it's been a long time since anybody told me that. In a positive sense, I mean. Rowena says I'm talented at getting under her foot, but that's hardly something to boast about. Genevieve had laughed at this, as she so often did, and the slightly awkward atmosphere which hung between the two young women dissipated. Genevieve's general knowledge was full of holes, but she was uncommonly gifted in the art of buoying others. Letitia doubted she would have felt half as comfortable in Hatton if not for Genevieve. She was not the young girl she had expected, or indeed hoped for, but she was certainly charming. It was hard not to like her, really. This was how Letitia's first week in Hatton passed. The pain of parting from Clara had not yet faded, but each hour she spent with Genevieve made it more bearable. Soon that pain, which had been sharp at first, faded to little more than a dull ache. It flared out more powerfully during the midnight hours, like a throbbing tooth, but Letitia was going better at ignoring it. Letitia had even begun to wonder whether in time she might grow to forget about Clara completely. Arthur Langley was a peculiar man with peculiar tastes. Yet despite his foibles, he seemed not to be particularly God-fearing. For the servants of Hatton travelled to Beeston's local church, St. Osbert's, every Sunday morning for their prayers. Arthur did not travel alongside them. He instead remained shut away in his study alongside all his dusty Latin books, which, Letitia supposed, he found more enlightening than religious parables. As Arthur prayed alone within the confines of his study, Letitia was ignorant to this fact. In the last week, she had learned very little of her employer. And so it was that Sunday. Letitia found herself bound for St. Osbert's. The church was located on the outskirts of Beeston, and it was a good half an hour away from Hatton, situated through the dense marshes. The church was surrounded by a sweep of fens, built upon a shallow hill which was peopled all around with crumbling tombstones and gorse bushes. Oh, gorse again. Gorse is a real problem. It just keeps on growing and it does not stop. Genevieve, Miss Ree, and Letitia all rode to the church in Gerard's carriage. Genevieve's eyes were fixed upon the marshes, her lips pursed in disdain. What a perfectly miserable day, Genevieve announced, apropos of nothing, her nose wrinkled like a haughty queen's. Then again, it's always miserable around here. It's little wonder Father never leaves his study. He shuts himself away in the dark with all his books, just like an Egyptian mummy. A mummy? That's a good description. Gerard, whose attention ought to have been focused upon the horses, laughed. Miss Ree, meanwhile, looked less than amused. I must ask you not speak of your father like that. It is uncouth. And why can't I? My dear saintly father isn't here. He's never here. I can't remember the last time he deigned to see me, much less speak to me. Perhaps he would feel more obliged to make time for you. Were your company not something one ought to endure? As a young lady, you should act more genial. And, as my father, I fear he ought to act more like a proper parent. I suppose we can't all have what we want in this world, though. Genevieve, show some respect to your father, please. Even of his absence, such remarks are the height of rudeness. You ought to know that he's busy with his studies. Yes, I am aware. My father's research comes first. That has always been the case. Genevieve's fingers curled into fists. But his mouldy old books before mother, though he knew she was with child, it's no surprise, really, that he treats me with similar disregard. What worth do I have, really? I'm only his blasted daughter. Don't be so churlish now. Your father loved your mother. What happened to Mistress was unfortunate tragedy. But it was an accident. Your father had no worldly way of perceiving that the baby would be born so very premature. If you were to speak to him on the subject, I'm sure you would discover how greatly he regrets it. He can regret it all he likes, but it won't bring Mother back. Mother wouldn't even have been with child were it not for him. He as good as murdered her. Why would I wish to show him any sympathy? Genevieve! Miss Reed turned her eagle eye upon the young mistress, but practically vibrating with fury. I will not tell you again. Do not speak of your father like that. You will never get a husband if you cannot learn to mind your manners. As if I'd ever want a husband, if, in procuring one, I would be obliged to simper and scrape like an ingrate. I've no desire to do every little thing a man might demand of me, all because of his sex. I've never heard such claptrap in my life. If I adopted such a high and mighty attitude, I shudder to think what would have become of me. You wouldn't be able to afford such a high and mighty attitude, Rowena. You're too poor. My father doesn't pay you nearly enough for that. Why, I have all the beastly things to say. Miss Reed's face began to turn crimson with indignation. Her shuddering grew more pronounced than ever. Now it was apparent the cause of her shakes was not the road, nor Gerard's driving. Miss Reed! Miss Reed rounded on Letitia, who was still staring determinedly at her hands. I entrusted Genevieve to you in the hopes you might correct her poor attitude. It has been a full week already, but I see no change at all in her general comportment. Are you sure you've been instructing her thoroughly? Well, Oh, don't be so harsh, Rowena, old girl. Like I said, it's only been a week. They can't expect Miss Reed to work miracles, surely. She's no saintess. Titi was momentarily grateful for Gerard's intervention and smiled softly. Not, of course, that Gerard could see it, given his occupation with the horses. Genevieve, however, did notice, and she fixed Letitia with a piercing gaze, her lips pursed in a sullen line. Miss Reed, why are you grinning like that? Don't you mean to defend my honour? Hi, Wicked! Welcome in, welcome, welcome. This is going to be a short one because I thought collab time was like now, but collab time is hours away. So we're doing a bit of this catch up. Because I did go live. I did tell people I was live. I should present something. And we are playing a lovely gothic Yuri. It's horrific and dramatic and lovely. Oh, thank you, Wicked. Lovely to see you. Oh, my apologies. Letitia dipped her head, her brow furrowed. Though she could not see her own reflection, she felt her skin must have been white, maybe even green. There was an acrid smell of sulphur in the air. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Wicked. Much appreciated, given the reading. No, Letitia's kind of... She's of the, more common sense of mine, that sulphur just smells like rotten eggs and disgusting and everything. But I have to say, I do like the smell of sulphur personally. It clears the head. It's lovely. But apparently we do not approve of that here. Like the eggs, which Letitia had eaten for breakfast, the smell seemed to go stronger than ever in that moment, and her stomach turned. If only she knew what Genevieve's scowl meant. Was she upset at the display of camaraderie, however brief, between herself and Gerard, but jealous, perhaps? Letitia did not know. Genevieve's moods were so mercurial it was difficult to fully comprehend them. Do not suppose you can speak on Mr. Langley's behalf, Lockett. Miss Reese sniffed, her ropey hands folding sensibly upon her front. He is paying this woman enough. She's supposed to keep Genevieve in line, but how can she when she looks so very browbeaten? Why, she's not much older than Genevieve herself. She's like a little girl. Oh, aye, she's young. I voiced similar concerns myself. But I'd like to believe Miss Reed can fulfill her duties. She's at least put up with Miss Langley this far, hasn't she? My goodness, you make me sound like a problem child. Need I remind you, all of you, that I'm an adult. I cannot abide being treated like an infant. Begging the pardon then, miss. I'm just trying to diffuse the situation. Well, don't. I wish you wouldn't bother. Listening to you is unbearably aggravating. Your prattle makes me feel sick. Genevieve was not the only one who felt sick. Letitia's own stomach was churning horribly. She could feel the eggs she'd eaten for breakfast slosh about inside her stomach. Her intestines felt tied into knots. The acrid smell of the swamp was everywhere. It clung to Letitia's hair and the upholstery of the carriage. Not even the cool breeze could disperse it. Gerard's horses snorted, their trotting hooves beating across the ground. Flies buzzed lackadaisically in the air. Surely they were the very last flies of the year before autumn inevitably closed in. The marshes seemed to spread around them for miles upon miles. The muddy earth, flecked here and there with grimy water, looked like a mirage. It made Letitia feel very small, and despite her present company, very much alone. Oh my goodness, Letitia! This woman, she really needs to grow a backbone. It's sickening. A lot remained unsaid, hanging in the air like the smell of horses and mud and fetid water. At that moment, she would have been given anything to be anywhere else. St. Osbert's Church, as Letitia soon discovered, was a ramshackle old building quite unlike the church in London which the Mortimers had frequented. That church had been resplendent with stained glass, and everything had been light and spacious and airy. St. Osbert's, meanwhile, did not seem worth the awkward, uncomfortable journey it had taken to get there. After everything Letitia had endured, from Genevieve's scowling to Miss Ree's waspishness, it was something of a letdown, the icing of disappointment upon the bun of misfortune, so to speak, not bum. The church had been built in the 1200s or thereabouts, but had been rebuilt and torn down and transformed innumerable times throughout the centuries. Its severe remodelling had left it with a slanted tower, crooked windows, and old stone walls that were festooned with moss. The facade of the church was hewn with demons, their mouths gaping and twisted and filled with sharp teeth. These demons made Letitia shudder, for they were so unlike anything she had seen before. The interior of the church, meanwhile, was not much more of an improvement. The wooden pews were gathered closely together beneath the sloping roof, and the air smelled of mould and mildew. The Langleys, being the wealthiest landowners in the region, had the frontmost pew to themselves, not so very far from the pulpit. Arthur Langley was not in attendance, but an unwilling Genevieve sat there, with Miss Ree on her right. Letitia, as Genevieve's new governess, was bidden to sit by her pupil's left side on that most conspicuous of pews at the forefront of the building. The rest of Hatton's servants who had made the journey from the manor house to the church by foot were seated near the back of the building, as was the convention. Dinah was among them, as was Abigail, and the other assorted scullery maids whose names Letitia did not know. Hatton had so many servants they occupied 2 full pews. They comprised a fair chunk of the congregation, the rest being comprised of Beeston's residents. Letitia wished most dearly she could sit at the back with Dinah and Abigail. She would feel much more at home there. As it was, in her current position, she felt horribly exposed. She could feel dozens upon dozens of curious eyes boring into her back, which made her blush. She was a new face in St. Osbert's, and as such, she was commanding more than her fair share of attention. She could hear whispers floating in the air. The residents of Beeston were none too concerned about propriety, and it was easier for Letitia to pick out individual comments in the hazy cloud. "Who's that there woman sitting over yonder?" "I don't know. I've not seen her in these parts. Why in the world is she sitting with young Miss Langley?" "Maybe she's a relative. She could be her aunt." "I didn't know Lord Langley had any sisters." "And her clothes are too plain for starters. She doesn't look like a well-to-do lady." "Is she a servant, then? She must be living at that big house, if we've none of us seen her. She can't be a servant. If she was, she'd be sitting at the back with all the others." "A housekeeper, then?" "No, she's much too young. Besides, Lord Langley still has old Rowena. She's been working up at Hatton since I was a boy. He wouldn't get rid of her." "Did anyone get a look at her face? I want to know what she looks like." "I saw her when she walked in. She's not special. She has 2 eyes and a nose, just like the rest of us." Now, that knows not all of us has the privilege of having a nose. What about old Absalom?" "What happened to Absalom? Where did your nose go? Did you have an accident?" "Oh yes, poor Absalom. He was never right, he wasn't, after he came down with that awful fever." "Oh no." "Thank you for the pasta check, Dodo." I was starting to lean a bit. By this point, the whispers were anything but. They had increased in volume with each successive remark until Letitia felt mired in them. Her face was positively burning. She longed to sink down through the pew and beneath the roughly hewn floor. What happened to Absalom? How does a fever take away one's nose? Oh, I'm so curious. I wish I knew. She had never before been such an object of fascination. She had lived in London all her life, and the city was so large, nobody had thought to give her a second glance. Now she felt like an exhibit in a museum, or else a freak upon a stage. It was nothing short of humiliating. "Are you all right, Miss Reed?" Letitia's thoughts were soon interrupted, however, by a soft exclamation. This was coupled with a hand upon her own, fingers twined upon the wooden pew with hers. Her face still flushed, the young woman turned her head. She blinked, then replied in a hushed voice. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you, Genevieve." "Really? I'm not so sure about that." Genevieve's brow furrowed. "And as I believe I've already told you, you don't need to call me that. My full name is such a mouthful. Jenny is fine." "Oh no, I wouldn't want to be presumptuous. That is the name your father calls you." "Is it now?" Genevieve's eyes narrowed. "And when did he have cause to call me that?" "In his study when first I met him. Does he not often address you as such?" "He doesn't address me at all. As Jenny, or Genevieve, or Miss Langley, or even you. He has no opportunity to bequeath such appellations on me, for we never spend any time together. I didn't know he still called me that girlish nickname, though I wish he wouldn't." "You don't like it?" "I don't like it when he says it. But then again..." Here Genevieve smiled thinly. "I don't like anything he does. He's a bad man, a positive brigand. Forgive me, but your father did not seem so very bad to me, not when I met him." "He never does. He's good at making himself look like a gentleman. That's how he deceived Abigail. Don't let him deceive you too. Haven't you seen the size of her?" Genevieve glanced behind her. She peered between the gaps of heads and shoulders, until she finally sought out Abigail, who was seated at the back of the church. Letitia wondered if Abigail's stomach had always been that big. Perhaps it just seemed more noticeable now because of everything Genevieve had told her. Was her mind playing tricks on her? It seemed possible. Her sleep had been so fragmented as of late thanks to the scuttling rats and the rapping upon her windows. Everything was so hazy and confusing, her own thoughts half-formed. It was hard to think when the smell of sulphur hung so stubbornly in the air. She could smell it even now in the church, though here it was diluted with the lingering stench of old age and decay. Letitia shuddered. Christ, she's getting bigger by the day. I'm afraid her stomach will burst, and then the baby will come tumbling out all over the flagstones. Now that would be something worth gossiping about. Genevieve! Genevieve is horrendous for this time period, but I have to say she's very fun. I do love her. Letitia hissed at her pupil, aghast. Don't say that, that's horrible. Well, it's true. Pregnancies aren't pretty unless you think Abby's like the sainted Virgin Mary. Genevieve tutted. I know she's no virgin, though. Not after my father. Please. Letitia said weakly, taking Genevieve's wrist between her fingers. Let's not talk about that now. Not while we're in church. It seems wrong somehow. Oh, very well. I wouldn't want to make you squeamish. Genevieve turned obediently, so she was facing forth once more. Still, it's a good thing you're here. If it wasn't for you, everyone would be gawking at poor Abby instead. I wonder if that's why Father was so insistent you attend Sunday service with us, though he never comes along himself. He has far too many important matters to attend to. Do you think he's using me as distraction? It's a possibility. Father has no compunctions when it comes to using others. The double entendre in Genevieve's words made Letitia blush more fiercely than the whispers did. I wish people wouldn't gossip at all. It might be fun for them, but isn't for those involved. They can't help it. They're simple-minded. That's what happens if you live in the middle of nowhere. The fumes from the marshes must have addled them. That's why they have so many silly superstitions. This is a fine example of the bourgeoisie getting much too big for their britches. You're still humans, just like the simple folk you speak of. The only thing separating the two of you is the money and some silly ideas about titles and land ownership. You know of these superstitions? And our fair Letitia is also plagued by these silly notions too, of hierarchy and such. Of course I do. The servants talk about it a lot. If you sneeze, you need to throw salt over your shoulder to blind the devil, and hanging a hagstone on the end of your bed can ward off demons. Oh, I know what hagstones are. They're naturally occurring rocks. They have to be naturally occurring or they're not real. That erode a perfect circle inside them. And if you look through the hole, you can see things. They let you see the real. They're so cool. I wish I'd love to have a hagstone one day. Genevieve pulled her face. It's all nonsense, of course. These people believe it because they have nothing better to do. You shouldn't pay any attention to them. I'm trying not to, but it's difficult. I almost feel like I might faint. Oh, you poor dear. Maybe Rowena was right. You're really not so very old. Genevieve squeezed Letitia's fingers in a gentle, almost motherly manner. Had Lady Langley done such a thing for Genevieve herself when she had been young? Letitia supposed she should have found Genevieve's concern grating. She was older than she was, and her governess to boot. Genevieve should have had no cause to pity her. Letitia, it's because you have no backbone. She's walking all over you so easily because you have no backbone. If she let Genevieve carry on in such an intimate manner, the banners between them would soon crumble. Then Genevieve might no longer listen to her nor respect her. Letitia, she doesn't listen to you or respect you already. You're already doomed. Letitia knew she ought to put a greater degree of space between herself and her young mistress, yet, despite her foreboding, found she could not. Genevieve's kindness felt a rare precious thing, particularly in the grim, gloomy confines of St. Osbert's, and Letitia could not help but cling to it. Letitia, do you have any friends that aren't at workplaces you need? Gosh, she's such a fucking disaster. Don't worry, I'll protect you. I'm pretty feisty. Really? Why are you surprised by that, Letitia? Of course she's feisty. Have you seen her? Have you talked to her for 5 minutes? Seconds even? Goodness, woman. Letitia's brow furrowed. And how will you do that? Like this. A bold smile upon her face, Genevieve let her fingers fall from Letitia's palm. She rose to her feet before Genevieve could halt her, then turned about on her heels to face St. Osbert's congregation. The heels of Genevieve's shoes scraped against the stone floor and the wooden pew creaked. This alerted Miss Ree's attention, and when she saw Genevieve standing, she started. What are you doing, you silly girl? The sermon has yet to begin. Sit back down. That's right, Genevieve. It would be better to sit. I don't want you causing a scene. Letitia rose and took Genevieve's wrist between her hands, but Genevieve shook her off. By now nobody in St. Osbert's was staring at Letitia. Their eyes were focused upon Genevieve. They were all rapt, waiting. Genevieve. Miss Ree hissed once more, but Genevieve ignored her. Genevieve planted her hands upon her hips, her gaze sweeping across the congregation. Then she said in those crisp, clear vowels of hers, I don't know what you people are playing at, but I'd like it very much if you left my governess alone. Didn't your mothers ever tell you that it's rude to stare? It's like you were raised in barns, a lot of you. Then again, Genevieve's eyes hardened. That might not be so far off the mark. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. So saying, Genevieve turned on her heel and took her seat anew. Following this little announcement, a deep, heavy silence fell. It was so quiet Letitia could hear the wind beyond the church's thick stone walls. She could hear, too, the rapid beating of her own heart. What in the world had Genevieve done? She had spoken out so callously in the house of the Lord, no less, and for what? To defend the honour of her plain governess, whom she'd only known for a week? Yes, she is courting you. She is wooing you quite clearly, woman. How thoughtless could one girl be? She's thinking quite clearly. Her actions are all very practiced and precise. Miss Rear was right. Genevieve would never get her husband if she continued acting out as she had. What would everybody think? I don't think Genevieve wants a husband. Letitia knew she ought to scold Genevieve, but she could not. That would have felt like a betrayal of sorts. Oh, sweetie. Honey bun, you were just talking about how there need to be barriers. You cannot betray a student by scolding them. Improper behaviour. You're doomed. Genevieve had done wrong, but she had done so for her. She shouldn't have to. Letitia had never been defended so. She doubted that Clara, close that they had been, would have done such a thing on her behalf. Probably because she was like a normal girl. Genevieve was nothing like any young lady Letitia had ever met. She was a law up unto herself, as untamed as the moors she had played in as a little girl. My goodness, did you see all their faces? Genevieve grinned gleefully, her grey eyes flashing. They looked so surprised I thought they might choke. Old Jonah's eyes were practically bugging out of his head. Well, it serves him right for being so rude. That's no way to talk to a lady. And that's no way a lady should talk either. Don't gloat so, you saucy madam. Don't you have any shame? Shame? What is that? Genevieve cocked her head to one side, her eyes large and imploring. I'm afraid Miss Reed has yet to teach me this particular subject. I am ignorant of oh so many things. You're certainly ignorant when it comes to manners. If you were younger, I'd cane your knuckles for that. So you think it's all right to gossip in a church? You surprise me, Rowena. No, I do not think that. Do not twist my words, young lady. I'm twisting nothing. You are the one twisting yourself up into knots. Do try to relax or you might strain your brain. You're not as young as you used to be, you know. Everyone's problem is that Genevieve has inherited her father's intellect. She is much too clever for a young lady and they do not know what to do about it. I'm going to have some more water. She desires someone she can control. Clearly. And she has found someone who is controllable quite quickly. Genevieve sounded so perfectly innocent despite the rudeness of her remarks. You know, Genevieve would be a very good VTuber. She would. Her temperament would get her so many fans. Of course, people would also hate her for it, but you know, I think she would be quite popular. Letitia found her mouth twitching. She wanted desperately to laugh, but she knew she could not. Then Miss Rue would bring her rage down upon her head. She could not stop herself from smiling, though, albeit secretly. Letitia had known Genevieve for only a week, but already she found her enchanting. That's it, guys. She's officially doomed. She said it herself. She's enchanted by this girl. She's done. We can't save her. When the sermon began proper, led by a baleful-looking priest, Letitia found she scarce paid any attention to his words. She was far too fixated upon Genevieve. Genevieve is a very fun name to say as well. I enjoy saying it. I recommend people try it out. After the debacle in church, Letitia turned to Hatton Manor alongside Genevieve and the indomitable Miss Reed. As it was a Sunday, Letitia had no pressing matters to attend to. She had thought to spend the day in her room curled up with a book. She did not yet feel brave enough to explore Hatton itself. But it was not to be. Less than 5 minutes after Letitia had settled herself down, she heard a rapping upon the door. It was a gentle, unobtrusive sort of knock, which Letitia recognized instantly. She knew the knocking to be Dinah's, yet Letitia could not think why she would be visiting her at such an hour. Their interactions were confined to the mornings, presided over by staring kippers and bowls of steaming porridge. It was now around 1 o'clock, a little after midday. What could she possibly want? Begging your pardon, Miss Reed, may I come in? I've been sent here by the master himself. Dinah's voice filtered through to Letitia from the other side of the wooden frame. At the mention of Arthur Langley, she felt her face pale. Why did Arthur want to see her? Was it related, perhaps, to Genevieve's outburst in the church? Though he had not been present during the affair, he might have heard of it second-hand from a fuming Miss Reed. Did he mean to upbraid her, or else question her credentials? Letitia stewed for a few moments, her thoughts anxious and uneven, when... Miss? Dinah spoke once more, her genteel summons coupled with yet another rapping upon her bedroom door. Are you in here, miss? Oh, yes. My apologies, please come in. Thank you. Letitia watched warily as the door handle turned. The lock clicked, and then Dinah stepped into her room, prim and pretty as ever. The fair maid's eyes swept about Letitia's room. Though Letitia had dwelt there for a week, it was every bit as cold and impersonal as it had been when she first arrived. She had few possessions, and the paintings on the walls were nondescript, landscapes and the like. The only thing that had truly changed since Letitia's arrival was the interior of the wardrobe. Once empty, it now hung with a paltry row of Letitia's dull skirts and blouses and dresses. Dinah frowned. Forgive me for asking, miss, but is this room quite comfortable enough for you? It is more than comfortable. It is far larger than that in my previous lodgings. In fact, I fear it might be a bit too large. Letitia spoke lightly, but her words belayed a certain kind of tension. Often when she lay in bed at night, it seemed that her bedroom, and indeed Hatton itself, was expanding around her. She felt smaller and more insignificant with every passing second, adrift and alone, like a piece of debris. Are you waiting for any items to be brought to you from London? Your room seems rather sparse. Oh, no. Letitia smiled wanly. I can make do with what I have. Letitia had never owned many material goods to begin with, and the few mementos she had of the Mortimer family had been left behind, including gloves that Clara had sewn her one Christmas, and the dented snuff box that had once been Lady Mortimer's. Letitia did not want to cling to any items which might remind her of her old position. They would have served only to make her unhappy, more so than she was already. Right. I see. Dinah's cheeks turned pale pink. Forgive me for prying then. It is just... She swallowed. I would not like to think of you as being lonely. It's hard to be lonely when I'm with Miss Langley every other hour. Yes, I suppose it must be. Dinah glanced down at the floor. For a moment, Letitia was half certain she saw a shadow cross the other woman's brow. But then it faded, faster than it had arrived. Had she, perhaps, been imagining things? Hatton Manor was such a secluded place. The sunlight dyed an airy green through all the ivy, that it was easy to let one's thoughts race ahead of reality. Well then, Dinah lifted her head to once more meet Letitia's gaze. As I mentioned, the master wishes to see you. He asked me to send for you directly. Is that so? Letitia tried to sound calm, but her anxieties had begun anew to gnaw at her. The rumours she had heard about Arthur Langley swirled in her head, thick as mud. She felt like a young child, called out for some minor indiscretion by an angry schoolmaster. Arthur Langley wasn't going to shout at her, was he? He didn't seem like the sort, but appearances could be deceiving. Do you know what he wants, Dinah? Dinah shook her head. He didn't say. I'm not privy to all the master's thoughts. I'm just a scullery maid. Oh, I see. I apologize. It's quite all right. Dinah smiled briefly. The master is in his study. I can guide you there if you would like. It was a thoughtful offer, but something about it further fueled the flicker of anxiety in Letitia's breast. While she was nervous about speaking to Arthur, it was true. She could not forget the strange look which had crossed Diana's countenance moments prior. She had told herself it was a hallucination. A trick of the light, maybe. But for a split second, Diana had looked truly disgusted. Letitia had to dig her fingers into her thighs to suppress a shudder. The greenish light that filtered in through the windows made her look green too. And Diana, and the whole room. She felt like she was sinking into an ocean. It was hard to breathe. Thank you very much, Dinah, but I wouldn't like to take up too much of your time. I believe I can find Mr. Langley's study myself. Are you sure? Hatton Manor is quite large. It can be intimidating. I was always getting lost when I first came here. My sense of direction isn't the best, it's true. But I know where Arthur Langley's study is. I have been there before. Very well then. If you're sure, I'll leave you to it. Only what? One does not like to gossip. This mightn't be nothing. It's just silly servant talk, but, well... Dinah's fingers fisted against her white apron, which had been starched to sparkling perfection. There have been some unsavoury rumours about the master. I don't believe them, of course. It's all baseless, like I said, but... Dinah scuffed the floor with the tip of her shoe. There is a reason why the female servants do not feel comfortable in his presence. I know your status is higher than mine, but in his eyes you are still an employee, and, well... Please take care of yourself. I would hate it if anything happened to you. You asked to see me, sir? Ah, Miss Reed. Arthur Langley sat up a little straighter in his chair, his fingers stapled together upon his desk. Though Arthur was smiling, this was not enough to diminish the knot of tension in the pit of Letitia's stomach. Arthur's study, spacious though it was uncomfortably oppressive. The magpies enshrined in their glass cases, beaks agape, glared at her, while the multitude of Latin texts made her head reel. Arthur's large mahogany desk seemed as innocuous a place as any to rest her eyes, though it too was stacked with books. Arthur's intelligence, his dominance, was everywhere. Letitia was only a governess. Arthur Langley was a scholar, a well-respected man of letters. In the privacy of his own office with the door pulled to, Arthur could do whatever he wished. His authority was unshakable. The one man, so unassuming, despite his smart dress, owned all of Hatton, and the servants who lived within it. If he gave Letitia an order, she would not have been able to refuse it. Was that how he had come to dominate poor Abigail? Perhaps their trysts, which had resulted in Abigail's bulging stomach, had occurred within this very room. Her flushed flesh pushed against the wall, or bent over the desk, or... Miss Reed? Arthur surveyed Letitia quizzically, and she felt herself jump. Her face was on fire. She felt feverish. What in the world was she thinking? I do apologize. I was lost in thought. Letitia feared that Arthur might scold her for this, but no rebuke was forthcoming. The smile upon his face did not waver. That is quite all right. I could never censure one of my employees for thinking. I fear people do not do it nearly enough. Sir, are you not displeased with me? Not at all. Why should I be? Well, it's just... Letitia shifted from foot to foot, momentarily blindsided. Arthur did not conduct himself as a selfish tyrant, but this might have been a front. His kindness did little to lighten Letitia's spirits. If anything, it made her feel uneasier still. Did she truly trust Arthur's gentle expression? I assumed when you summoned me here that you wished to scold me. It would hardly be too surprising after everything that happened at church this morning. Aha! Arthur's blue eyes twinkled. You are referring, I take it, to Jenny's little outburst? Yes, sir. I presume Miss Reed told you of it. Yes, indeed. She came stomping up the stairs to my study full of fury, like a... well, rather like a fury, I suppose. She said I should have educated Miss Langley more thoroughly. Perhaps she was right. So is that what has been weighing upon you? I did wonder. You're trembling like a leaf. Arthur leant forward, his handsome face tinged faint green in the midday light. Well, you needn't worry about that, if indeed that is what you are worrying about. My Jenny has always been a law unto herself. Please don't apologize on her behalf. But Miss Rhea is right. I should have said something, tried to stop her perhaps. That I could not restrain her is proof of my own failure as her governess. Do not be so hard on yourself now. You could have recited half the Bible to my Jenny, it wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference. When my daughter has her heart set on something, she won't let anything sway her. I see. So... Letitia's fingers curled about the fabric of her skirt. You're not mad? Not at all. No real harm has been done. Jenny's outburst sounds like it was a most amusing diversion. I only wish I could have been there to witness it. But if the villagers start gossiping about Genevieve, Miss Langley, I mean, then... Let them. Beeston is quite some distance away. Their acrimonious whispers can hardly affect us. No, I suppose they can't. You are right, sir, but... But? Arthur cocked his head to one side. My dear Miss you almost make it sound as though you wish to be punished for my Jenny's misconduct. You don't want me to dock your wages, do you? Oh no, that isn't what I meant, sir. I thought not, no. You need those wages more than most, I'll warrant, given your circumstances. My circumstances? Yes, indeed. Did you not say you need to work to support your ailing mother who lives in Harrogate? I distinctly remember you mentioning that. You sounded so very impassioned I could not help but feel for you. Oh, that's right, sir. Letitia nodded, abashed at her own forgetfulness. What a poor actress she was. I need to work so that I might provide for my mother. You poor thing. Arthur clicked his tongue. Do you know if your condition has improved? No, sir. You mean to say you have not spoken to her? I sent her a letter, sir. And you have yet to receive a reply? Yes, sir. Oh dear. Arthur's eyes softened with apparent concern. Hope you hear from your mother soon, Miss Reed. I will pray for her swift recovery. Thank you, sir. That is quite all right. One shouldn't be thanked for expressing basic human decency. I know how it feels, you see, to lose a loved one. As Arthur spoke, Letitia found her eyes being drawn to the portrait which hung above the mantelpiece. The woman with the red hair gazed back at her, fingers resting upon the parted pages of a book. The woman's grey eyes and untamed locks had made quite the impression the first time Letitia had seen it, but now it seemed of even greater import. The woman enshrined in her gilt frame looked just like Genevieve. Now, about your wages. Arthur cleared his throat. I fear I didn't make things clear enough during our initial meeting. That is why I summoned you here. I thought it best to restate the facts. Arthur started to tell Letitia of her monthly wages in a genteel and measured manner which helped soothe the worst of Letitia's worries. Arthur Langley, with his fair hair and blue eyes, did not seem like a rake. Neither did he seem like the sort of man who would carry on indiscriminate affairs with his serving staff. He appeared in all regards to be a gentleman, from his comportment to his consideration. He even remembered to show compassion for his servants, which was something many so-called members of the gentility forgot. As Arthur spoke, the taxidermy birds with their pointed beaks began to lose their viciousness, the Latin texts their frightful obscurity. Arthur's office was an ordinary sort of one, and he seemed a thoroughly ordinary sort of man. Okay, Dodo, you rest well. I hope you get some sleep. Letitia simply could not overlay the face of her employer over the image of him. It is daytime for me. I hope you have a good sleep, though. Over the image of him Genevieve had drawn. They seemed almost diametrically opposed. I'll be finishing in a minute anyway. As seen earlier by certain members of the public, I mistook when my collab time was, so I need to have like at least an hour break in between this silly upset and the actual collab time. Was Genevieve perhaps mistaken about her father's supposed vices? I trust that will be a sufficient explanation. Do you have any questions? No, sir. Thank you for explaining this so thoroughly. I hope it did not take too much of your time. Letitia eyed the books, which were piled upon Arthur's desks. It seemed like he'd be in the middle of researching something when Letitia interrupted, because some of the tomes were split open, lying facing down like large butterflies. Noting her concern, it was not hard, for Letitia wore all her feelings on her face. Arthur smiled. It is quite all right. I would not have sent Pruitt for you if I was busy. But these books... Oh, this is just a bit of light reading. The books didn't look very light to Letitia. Some of them looked particularly hefty, thick enough to be used as cudgels. Though Letitia herself could read, reading was in fact one of her favourite pastimes. She doubted she would ever be able to plough her way through those heavy volumes. I think that's where I'll end it today. I know it's been a shorter one, but that is simply because of me and my mix-up. But yes, I will be back. I will be back later at... Let me get the exact time for people so I don't mess this up again. I will be back later at 6:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is the exact time. But it was nice getting some more of Salome's Kiss out of the way. We've needed to do that. We really have. It was being required for a bit. It was lovely hanging out for a bit, and I will see you all in an hour or so. Bye bye!